welcome to the Monday evening.
You love ball like I do. After Dark, it's a must listen.
It's where I go to get my hoops fixed.
This is Field of 68 After Dark.
All right, welcome in. It is Sunday night on the Field of 68 After Dark. I am Chris Childress. I got two great basketball minds with me right now. The fabulous Randolph Childress is alongside, and the esteemed writer CJ Moore. Not the sexiest Sunday of basketball games, a little ho-hummy. I guess the NFL decided they were going to steal the day, but a pretty good weekend. We're inching closer to the new year, Christmas behind us, which means some really exciting basketball is coming down the pike. So certainly an exciting time. Today, not a lot of meat to get into for the games today, but we're going to go big picture, kind of a reset of what's going on as we get a little deeper into conference play. The non-con is mostly over. A couple teams have played a couple of games in league, but we're really going to get into the meat and potatoes. And let's start, gentlemen, with UCLA. If you look at the biggest win of the weekend, I think it's got to be for Mick Cronin and his Bruins. They take out Gonzaga yesterday. The defense rules the day. The Bruins beat the Zags 65-62. Kind of needed it. Their stock dropped a little bit after losing to North Carolina. It's well documented on the show what North Carolina has been through this season. Not to make Randolph talk about North Carolina early, but when you look at UCLA, Randolph Childress, certainly a get-right game and then some yesterday for them against Gonzaga.
Well, it gives you a quality win that you need. I mean, a resume-boosting win, right? And it was against a really good team, a hard-fought game, obviously a one-possession game. And for UCLA, like I said, we don't when they get into conference play, we don't know what it's going to be like. It's just wide open. They're going to win some, they're going to lose some, but they needed a signature win outside of conference play, and they finally get that against Gonzaga. So I think they're a well-coached team. I think they're a tournament team. They're going to be there. I don't think anybody questions that. But they did. We need to continue to measure this team against quality opponents, and they finally beat one.
They did, CJ Moore. I guess the question is, how good is UCLA? When you look big picture, I mean, you look around the league right now, certainly Illinois looks like a solid team. When you look at the top, the Oregon Ducks are right there. It's a new Big Ten, an interesting looking Big Ten. UCLA's first year of having to navigate. You look at the schedule coming up, some newcomers on the schedule like Nebraska and Maryland and Rutgers and Michigan over the next couple of weeks, but they lose to North Carolina, tight game. They bounce back against Gonzaga. Big picture, we know the defense is pretty damn good, but how do you view UCLA compared to the other elites in the Big Ten?
Well, I think the Big Ten is kind of a crapshoot. Like it is wide open, but I think UCLA is a team that's going to factor in the inbound schedules will play a part, and they're not going to play the same teams that the teams out east are going to play. But I think UCLA, you have to be pretty pleased with where the Bruins are right now, considering the amount of roster turnover McCronin had. It's good to see that this team is getting back to playing Cronin style defense. Like they've really, really improved that on that end of the floor. I think some of the transfers have really been good. Tyler Bilodeau, a guy that I've always thought could be a really, really quality player is Kobe Johnson, who had his moments at USC, and he bounced back yesterday after putting up a goose egg against the Tar Heels. So I think it was encouraging to see them, be able to bounce back and win a game like that against a really, really solid Gonzaga team. So as far as where they stand in the pecking order of the Big Ten, I think they're near that upper tier, but it's really hard to say. I think that I'm sure we're going to get into it, but there's probably 4 or 5 different teams that could win the Big Ten. It wouldn't surprise me.
How
I
different
like
is
them
it?
though. I like
Go
them a
ahead,
lot
yeah,
though
go ahead,
because we talk about with them. They got an identity, man. They got a defensive identity, right? Like that wasn't a pretty game against Gonzaga. And you mentioned Kobe Johnson. He and Daly knocked down 8 or 11 from threes, and in a game where they weren't making shots, they were making threes, and that's the way UCLA is going to play. They're going to play defense. We're going to wonder where their offense is going to come from. Is it going to be Bilodeau one game? We don't know. He was great in the Carolina game. This game it was Daly, so it's always going to be somebody different. But I think they got a chance to be amongst the top group of guys because they got a defensive identity that I don't think some of the other teams have.
It's a good place to start. I mean, you're going to be in every game because you can stop people, and so you're going to have a chance. And will you have enough offense to get over the hump? Time will tell once we get into Big Ten play with this team. My question to both of you, really, and you look around the Big Ten at the elite teams, I think a couple of them that stand out are 2 newcomers. I mean, UCLA being one of them, and then Oregon and Mick Cronin being another one. And Oregon's done a nice job of kind of growing guys, in-state, homegrown guys, kind of a different kind of looking team. They got the nice big guy from in-state. When you look at the Oregon Ducks and UCLA, and add USC, et cetera, but how different do you think of a road is it to navigate through, CJ Moore, when you're looking at opposed to last year, the Pac-12, what they've been through before? How different, or do they have to approach the regular season different before they can, do all the things they want to do in March?
Well, I mean, it's probably sounds like a coach speak answer, but I think you just have to kind of take it one at a time and not try to look at the big picture because you maybe get a little overwhelmed. The big difference I think they'll have between the Pac-12 and the Big Ten is the depth of the quality of teams in the Big Ten is much more impressive than what we've seen out of the Pac-12 the past couple of years. So I think these, those top tier teams, UCLA, Oregon, while they've been down, really the last couple of years, but they're going to have to bring it on a night in and night out basis. And UCLA's kind of got a good head start because the fact that they were able to win a game at Oregon. I mean, that's going to be one of your hardest road games, and you've already got it out of the way, and you got to win. And off that 2-0 start in the Big Ten, getting those 2 pre-Christmas conference wins was huge, especially with one of them being on the road.
Yeah, no question about it. The other team we want to really kind of look at out of the gates here, as far as the elite teams and kind of look where they stand, is Illinois. And Illinois certainly has been in this league. They got a nice win today. They didn't play anybody of valor. They whipped up on Chicago State, who's, quite honestly, one of the worst teams in college basketball. But, a nice, easy win after the holidays. Didn't have to take it too serious, not too stressful. They beat Chicago State 117-64 today at the State Farm Arena in Champaign. So not too stressful for Illinois. But I want to focus on the big picture. They just won that rivalry game against Missouri. They had that fight tooth and nail against Tennessee. I think that impressed a lot of people. And really and truly, we can get into the nuance of the Illinois basketball team and how it's that, in fact, let's start there. Then we'll get into the big picture of what Brad Underwood has done. But looking at this roster in particular, Brad Underwood told me right to my face, he said, look, man, when the whole portal thing opened up, he said, I might never recruit a high school kid ever again. Why would I? I could evaluate these kids in college and I can get a real idea of who they are, then maybe add some pieces internationally, et cetera. When you look at this team he's put together, Randolph, Childress, how does Illinois stack up near the top of the Big Ten?
I mean, the talent's there. I mean, the experience is there. Outside of Yakashonas, obviously, he's a freshman. The only thing I worry about with them is maybe some athleticism on the interior on the front line. But I think they're the most talented team in the Big Ten. So I think they're going to have something to say when it's all said and done. I think that, who decides the Big Ten championship, it'll be Champaign, Illinois, it'll be somewhere else. We'll see what other team is. I think they're that good. I think this is Brad Underwood's talented group. I think a really talented group of guys. I won't say if it's the most talented team he's had, but really talented group. And I think they'll be there. I think talent-wise, they stack up amongst the best. And in the end, I think talent overcomes some of the, talent rises to the top over some of these coaches. I think there's so many good coaches in that league. They coach their teams up, but the talent in Illinois, I think, is the best in the Big Ten.
Yeah, CJ, I don't take for granted what he's done. I mean, this is a guy where he took over a program that was barren. It was a wasteland. It was kind of icky when you look at, post Bruce Weber and John Gross and what this program was. He's done a nice job kind of adapting who he is with this portal era. As I mentioned a minute ago, he kind of changed the way he evaluates. And certainly, as Randolph said, he's put together a nice looking group.
Yeah, I think as we evaluate like the non-conference, the first couple months of the season, I think Brad's done about as good a job as anybody in the country, just because, I mean, they lost everybody from last year. This is a completely new team. And the fact that they've kind of found an identity already. And, Yakashonis has been outstanding. He's awesome. But I really like how Colin Boswell's kind of fit next to him as like a defensive first guy who really understands his role and plays well off Yakashonis. And then, just the fact that they know who they want to be. They want to get big, long guys that can shoot it, and have really leaned into that, spread it out, attack mismatches type of offense. And I think he's done a tremendous job of identifying guys that they want, that fit them, and being able to get them to kind of play together really quickly, and especially a young team. It's impressive the job he's been able to do so far.
Well, we had a great special guest there. So hello to DJ Moore.
Henry sneaking in.
Yeah, it was in his jammies getting ready for a snooze, just saying goodbye to Dad. I love that little cameo right there. But no, KJ's been amazing as a freshman from Lithuania, certainly a star player. As we've watched Illinois, that was kind of the question that Brad Underwood had going into the season. When I need somebody to make a play, when I need somebody to hit a shot down the stretch, who is that guy? He's only a freshman. If you're a coach, Randolph, are you comfortable with that? I mean, as good as he's been, is that okay to have somebody that young in that position?
No, I mean, you can't. He's talented, right? He's proven already what he's capable of doing. Why would you doubt that? One thing I'm going to add too, guys, is, and this is just me, what I feel a lot of times we'll applaud coaches for how they're maneuvering or they're changing their program the way it is now. They have to now. And he's just, it shows that he's the ones who are resistant are the ones that are struggling, and then they're, ultimately you get frustrated. Either you're resigning or you're just going to lose. So if you don't adjust to the way this is, credit. I always say sometimes, like, I've gotten in trouble with some of the fans because it's like when I'm talking about Kentucky, I'm like, you're Kentucky, and we'll get into Mark Pope and give him his flowers and everything else, but the expectations is different at certain places. So crediting him for doing this at a program, but if you want to flip a program, you have to freaking adjust. And sometimes we give, and credit to him for doing it, but he's coaching his tail off. He's getting talent there. He's doing it in different ways. That he's showing you how great of a coach he is. But sometimes we just give, we talk too much about, credit for doing something that you have to do it. It's like you try to do it in those, it's like trying to coach right now in the old school way. You cannot do it. I mean, Izzo is holding on to his philosophy, but what he is, but he's somebody when you go to Michigan, that's what you're dealing with. So you don't even go if you can't. But everybody else can't coach and pull that off. So you're forced to adjust. And so if you don't adjust, you're going to struggle and you're going to get fired. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, well, he's done it well. And they have a very talented team because he's adjusted well and adapted. And the other ones that haven't, a lot of them have left the game. They've said, I'm like Jim Larinaga did the other day, I'm good. I do not want to do this anymore. So certainly tip of the cap to Brad Underwood. I think it's interesting as you look at the three coaches we just talked about, when you look at Dana Altman, when you look at Mick Cronin, and when you look at Coach Brad Underwood, what they've done for their programs. When Mick Cronin got the job, he was like choice 8, wasn't he? I mean, he was kind of down the list of guys they wanted. I don't think anybody really looked at him as a longevity dude. And he's certainly done a nice job. And when we look at them right now in their first year in the Big Ten, is well positioned. And Brad Underwood was a guy that Josh Whitman would not leave his house. Brad's a guy that I've gotten to know over the years as a friend. And he told me the story. He's like, listen, I got back from that NCAA tournament game, CJ, and he was sitting in my driveway. I got back from Oklahoma State, Michigan, in Indianapolis. He was sitting in my driveway, said, "Not leaving until you're my coach." He paid me more than Lovie Smith was making at the time. And he said, I knew that he wanted Illinois basketball to be good again. So, kind of interesting, the stories that we've seen with these guys and how they've been able to build these programs.
Yeah, and I think, one thing with Brad that he's done a really good job with is, and I talked to him about this, did a story on this last March, is he decided he needed to change his style of play. And Kofi was an awesome big dude, but he thought to win in March, like you had to go more perimeter oriented, be able to play faster, be able to spread the floor, and have more versatile type guys. And I think they've really recruited to that the last couple of years and changed their style of play, and they've been able to do it. As far as Mick Cronin, like being a longevity guy, I'd push back on that a little bit. He was at Cincinnati for a while and did really well. He's a guy that I think
I'm
is
just
usually
saying
going to
when
win.
he got the job at UCLA, it wasn't like, oh my God, we got Mick Cronin. It was like, oh, we had to
Yeah.
That's what I mean by that.
For sure. Oh, I got you. No, but he's, I think Mick had to flip that roster. I think last year they tried to go an international approach, which you've seen Illinois, having some success with that, and UCLA really leaned into that a year ago, and it didn't go so hot. And they needed to hit the portal and get some guys that were more experienced and could become offensive. Better offensive options, could guard better, and they've done that. The guy that's really surprised me, Randolph, I don't know how you feel, but like Eric Daly, the kid from Oklahoma State, I didn't see this coming necessarily from him. He's shooting the heck out of the ball, and he's been really good. I mean, he was huge for them yesterday, but sometimes that's what it takes, is like identifying a guy that maybe not everybody is after, and seeing that guy has potential if you feel like if you get him in your program. And getting guys like that to hit are a huge part of, winning in today's climate.
They're going to be able to defend and stay in games, right? And if they can keep this, they don't know. I don't know if they know or sure about what they're going to get on a night in and night out on the offensive basis, right? I think, but again, the way they defend, long as whether it's Sky Clark or anybody else, one of these guys comes up, it's just a different guy. And they don't have to rely on one guy, consistently every night and where they get their offense from. We talked about those two guys, going 8 of 11 from the 3-point line, Kobe and Daly. So I'm just high on them because, again, I think that's the hardest thing to deal with when you get into conference play. They're going to rely on the defensive end of the floor. They got a coach. If you play for Nick Cronin, that's what it is. You're going to defend, which means they're going to be in there. So I've never been down on them. They're going to be stable. They're going to be right there. It's up and down. He's going to have years like he had last year. They're not going to be the norm. They're more of an anomaly. He's making basketball relevant again at UCLA, which is something we don't talk about enough. They, in past years, it's just been like, man, we wasn't thinking about UCLA in the Pac-12. So good to see them back responding this year. I teased about that on our Christmas gift about him because he was kind of saying he was giving a finger back to everyone that was kind of trying to run him out of there a year ago.
Well, that's the elite in the Big Ten and teams we think that are, in the mix for big prizes this year. And certainly there's others that we haven't mentioned. But, when you look at teams that have been disappointing this year, I don't think you look any further in the Big Ten than the state of Indiana. It's kind of bizarre. I mean, you look at like football in Indiana's thriving and basketball's kind of, Purdue's certainly not. And I know the injury hurt early on, and they had a get-right win today against Toledo, but they've certainly had their druthers this year. Then Indiana just kind of blows, and I believe that's just become who they are. They're just not great. But when you look at both of them, CJ, bigger disappointment in your eyes this year and more explainable, Purdue or Indiana?
I think it's clearly Indiana. I mean, Purdue has played one of the best schedules in college basketball. That got ran off the floor by Auburn last weekend, but who hasn't gotten run off the floor by Auburn? Like they're doing that to a lot of people. The close loss to A&M, a road loss to Penn State, who's a pretty solid team, a road loss to Marquette. Like those are all explainable losses. They've got the Alabama win in there. They've got a win at home over Maryland. Like, the resume is not that bad, especially after you lose maybe the best player in your program's history. So, I think Purdue right now, where Purdue is, if you had told Matt Painter before the season he'd be 9-4 at this point, he'd probably be like, I wish I was a little bit better, but I probably, he might have taken that, like, with the schedule they have. So I don't think Purdue's necessarily been disappointing, but Indiana was a preseason top 25 team. It really made a point to go in the portal and spend some cash and get some, guys that we've heard of before: Miles Rice, Omar Ballo, return Mbako, return Renault. Like that was a team that you looked at on paper and you could talk yourself into them being a Big Ten contender, and they haven't played to that at all.
It's Indiana by a mile. It's Indiana by a country mile. And I've said this because, and I'll say this about Purdue. Purdue, you talked about it. They lost Zach Edey, and I said this early in the year, and the Purdue fans got all upset, and I don't give a crap. You're going to take a step back. And what I meant by that is you were the most dominant program in the Big Ten, and it wasn't even close. You dominated the league for 2 years. That ain't happening. You went to the national championship game last year. That ain't happening. You're a solid team. You're gonna win some, lose some in the Big Ten. That's all it is. You're a good. Let me take that back. You're a good team, but you're gonna be up and down. And you've shown that this year. You're relying on your big three. Credit to you. Coach Painter is one of the best in the business. It's just impossible. It's impossible to replace that. What you lost in Zach Edey. But Indiana, come on, man. It's like we got to talk. It's not even close with them. And it's because the expectations at Indiana is always to get back to whatever it was. And we've been talking about that. It feels like forever. Whether it's roster construction, whether it's how the pieces fit together with Indiana, we don't know. But they've had some freaking horrendous losses. And you just don't know what you're going to get from one game to the next. And I hope Mike Woodson figures it out. But there's players. And then Umabalo doesn't play, whatever that is, whatever that's about. You got some disciplinary actions going there. So that doesn't seem well. That seems that gives out a stench that there's a lot going on in Indiana, that this team is more likely to implode than respond and make a run in the Big Ten and never live up to those expectations. So I don't know how there's nothing we've seen so far this preseason to make us think Indiana's figured it out.
I just feel like we've been having this conversation for 20 years. I feel like this conversation is a never-ending saga at Indiana. Like, you and I and CJ all remember the Candy Stripes. We all remember Bobby Knight. We all remember them, winning big prizes and championships. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, like CJ's son that just came in, he's got no reference of Indiana ever being good. I mean, you're going to have 18-year-olds that they just don't know, because Indiana we've had this conversation every year. I think back to that year where Tom Crean had that one seed with what's that big center that he had? I forget his name, but
Zeller.
Yeah, you think about, like, outside of that, what the hell have they been? And they only went to the Sweet 16 that year. They're constantly failing to meet expectations. So I think the question really becomes, should their expectation level, and I got to believe, honestly, that football makes this worse with what they just saw with their football program, and it makes it more inexcusable, Randolph, that we're watching this with Indiana basketball.
Listen,
which should be
I said this. I said this a while ago. I said this before. Indiana's a victim of the expectations to what that program has been, and I know because now they have NIL, and everyone thinks like, all right, we got this money, and we're Indiana. Well, a big part of Indiana being what they were built off was keeping a local talent there, getting the players that were homegrown, staying in Indiana. And I don't know if that's been the case, but that's a lot of teams are dealing with that. So, right, I can say the same. There's a lot of teams across the country where I think the expectations, the programs have changed right now, and they have the resources to get back to that. Could they get back to it? It's a great environment, but for whatever reason, why is it not resonating with the kids to go there? They've had some pretty good coaches. We're not talking about one or two coaches stint here, and they've had some success, and that's my point. What are we talking about when we say with Indiana, what's success at Indiana? Are we holding them to a national championship standard? They ain't been close to that in God knows how long. So if we're holding them to that, or just a good program, where do we rank Indiana? Because if we're holding them in the last 20 years, what are they?
Average.
So
That's what they are.
It's still a really good. It's still a really good job though, because they have the fan support.
It's a great job. It's a great job.
You've seen they're willing to
I'm
spend.
not saying it's not. But
You got to hire the right coach. You know, I think they made the mistake that some schools make, that you try to go in the family. You know, you went and got an NBA guy, and you know it's he deserves, you know, an opportunity to see if he can turn this thing around this year. But I'm sure a lot of Indiana fans will want to have that conversation when it comes to you know, late March, early April. Is it time to move on?
That's the only. Listen, I don't disagree with you guys, and let me be clear, crystal clear, what I'm saying. Indiana is an unbelievable job. It's a great job, but it's also one of those jobs that when coaches are available, are they beating down the door to say, do I want to go there and live up to all the expect? Is everything there that I think I want to deal with or need to win championship? Like coaches, you didn't hear when these coaches are moving around, you don't hear about anybody saying they want to go there. Is it
yeah.
Go ahead.
Because when everybody keeps coming at you, when it's one coach after another, and it's, you know, nobody's ever happy. And I think in this era too, this NIL era, people's willingness to wait and see something develop is closing, because in the past maybe you have a down year, like look at Mick Cronin last year. He had a down year, but this year you can get it back together. But what's hard now, I think, is if you have a couple bad years in a row, like Indiana's looking like they might have, and this past year the donors stepped up and they gave them money to spend. Well, when you go back to them next year and you say, hey, we need another, you know, however many it is, $5-6 million to spend, they're going to say, well, we don't want to do that. And they're going to say, well, what will it take to get you to get there? And a lot of times those guys are going to say, hey, we want a new coach. That we want that. And that's
fine.
Hope.
But guess what?
Yeah.
Every coach in the country, every coach in the country is going to do that. Every program is going to do that, right? When you're now Indiana has the money, then what I'm saying is, then pony up and like BYU did and get dudes. Mm-hmm. And you want to get, everybody wants the perfect coach. Like everybody wants the Nick Saban. Oh, saying it's the right coach. Like if it was that simple, everybody would do it. But for whatever reason, why aren't coaches and why aren't players? And it reminds me of this, and I've said this about Texas, right? Who has more money and resources around in Texas? But there's a level of expectations of Texas basketball where in Indiana is different. Historically, Indiana is a national championship program. But it hasn't been that in these kids' generation, this younger generation. That's not it. They don't hold on to that. There are certain programs like that. And I'm not saying this to be bit dismissive or disrespectful to Indiana. I can say the same for Georgetown. These kids don't remember when Georgetown was going to the national championship. It's an entire different generation. Cooley is trying to change a culture, and that's all I'm saying with Indiana. Like you got a generation of kids that are like, man, we ain't tripping about no Indiana basketball.
Yeah, totally.
And you still have that expectation.
That's it.
You got to build a brand again.
100%. The modern kid does not care. Does not care about that brand. Break time. We'll come back. We'll unpack the SEC as we get close to the new year. We'll do it next on Sundays. Field of 68 after dark.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM for the season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Go download the BetMGM app and use the code FIELD today. Now that college basketball season is back in full swing, I need to remind you guys about our partners over at Autograph, where the real college hoops fans reside. The Autograph app curates all of the best content for every sports fan and every sports fan's favorite team. Podcasts, blogs, analysis. It's all there without the nonsense from the talking heads that don't actually watch the games. And there's a bonus. Consuming content on the Autograph app earns you coins that can be redeemed for rewards for things like no-fee tickets or signed jerseys from your favorite players. There are a couple new features in the app that I need to let you guys know about as well. Autograph Replay gives you a quick hitting summary of the previous day's news so you can keep track of all the important things going on with your favorite teams. And Autograph Rooms allows you to chat in real time with the true voices of fandom within your team's community. So go to the link in the description or scan that QR code on your screen and download the Autograph app.
All right, back here, Field of 68 after dark on a Sunday. We just got in to the Big Ten after it's been a nice little build-up to the new year, a little build-up to 2025. We've had a couple of conference games. It's going to get a lot sexier as we get deeper and deeper into the new year. Good to be here, though, tonight on this Sunday. Chris Childress with Randolph, Childress, and CJ Moore. So let's get into the southeastern part of the country right now. The SEC was all the talk of the early parts of 2024 this season. Alabama certainly has been great throughout the year. Auburn, Tennessee, number one team in America. It is a loaded league and a bunch of teams that feel that can compete for the championship. Alabama being one of them. We saw them play today. Again, the defense not great. They give up 82 points, but the offense explosive. They score 105 in a win over South Dakota State. They are now 11-2 on the season. They are 6-0 at home. Nate Oates took them to the Final Four a year ago. They got that veteran in the backcourt that knows how to win, that knows how to will them, and Mark Sears. Randolph, Childress, your thoughts on Alabama at this point? And not a tough opponent today, but another opponent where the offense very explosive.
They're a team, I think, defensively, you're going to have to grade them a little bit differently. You just can't look at the opponent's score and go, oh, they scored 82 points, their defense must suck. With the pace that they play and the style that they play, that's how they want the game to be. And they feel as though if the game is played at that pace, it's going to be hard for you to sustain it. Like, how many teams can go into a game and say, I know we're going to hang 90 up on the board. They play at just such a fast pace, and I think that's part of what happens with a lot of teams. They get sped up. If you're going to beat Alabama, you're going to have to control tempo and control pace and pick your poison with them, with the way they shoot. I would maybe try to deal with running them off the line or just staying there and just closing them out. I'd zone them or do different stuff, man. We've talked about this in nausea about, trying to defend guys. They offensively, they're a problem, but it's their pace, it's their amount of bodies, their talent. And as the guys come and get healthy again and this group stays together, I mean, they're going to be there in the end. The talent is there. So I'm not critical of Alabama with the defensive end of the floor, how many points they give up, because it's as simple as when they're making shots. When they're hitting threes, they're making 20-plus threes. Look out. I mean, they're just going to beat anybody at that point.
CJ, do you think they can pace themselves to a national title this year and get to that next step and win it all?
I mean, they have the talent and the bodies to do it. I mean, they're one of the deepest teams in the country. I think I've kind of said this last month or so that I don't really want to judge Alabama until we get into about mid-January. And I see what Alabama looks like with a healthy Chris Youngblood. And, he's had a couple games now, but, I don't know that he's had enough games to really get his legs yet. He is the guy that Nate Oates talked about coming into the year as being a guy that gives them a little bit more of a defensive identity, can kind of be their stopper type on the perimeter. He was talking about him as a leader type for that group. So I kind of want to see what they look like when he's at full strength. And, he hasn't shot it that great so far. They lost Latrell Reitzel, so he's going to have to be a guy that is able to come in and make some shots, but also just kind of give their defense a little more teeth. But they've got guys that can guard now. If Youngblood, Diabate has been, but I think a pleasant surprise. Darian Reed can guard, and obviously they brought in Clifford
More.
Felt like I had peanut butter in my mouth there. They brought him in to really be that defensive guy for them. So, but I think this is not a team that's maybe really played at its ceiling yet, but offensively coming along. But I do think at some point there are going to be games where they got to get guard and have a little bit more teeth to that defense, and maybe Chris will give them that. But I want to wait here a month or so before I really take a look at Alabama and let's see what we got. But Saturday's going to be fun. Oklahoma coming to town, undefeated Oklahoma. So that's one that's going to be circled on my timesheet on Saturday to get eyes on.
Massive prove-it game for Porter Moser and company too. So that will be a really fun game this weekend in the SEC. I just marvel. I think it's year 5 or 6 for Nate Oates of what the state of Alabama has become from a basketball culture. It's quite striking. I mean, you look at Alabama, you look at Samford even, you look at Auburn, who's, you could argue is the number 1 team in America. Certainly they're going to have a chance to be there at the end, and we'll talk about the Auburn Tigers in just a little bit. But it wasn't long ago. When Bruce Pearl got that job, him and I were working together. We were doing radio together, and I remember when he talked to the athletic director at the time, and he's like, "Man, can I turn Auburn into what I want it to be?" And certainly it's kind of amazing to see where it's at. And then Alabama, to me, tried to counter that, like, okay, Auburn, you're going to give a damn, you're going to try at this basketball thing, because those programs sat there. Nobody gave a damn. Coleman Coliseum was kind of icky. I know Auburn built arena, but Tony Barbie couldn't win. 100%, money, no question about it. But you kind of look at where they're at right now. They've invested so much into basketball, and they've convinced a football nutty state to really care. But, Nate Oates was a guy that came from Buffalo. It wasn't a sexy name. It wasn't, Avery Johnson was from the Spurs. They knew him. Nate Oates wasn't a guy that inspired anybody at the time. And, Randolph, it's kind of amazing. CJ makes him, trust me, I live in the South. Nobody knew who he was. Trust me.
No, but that goes back to what we were talking about when we mentioned this about Indiana the other day. Everyone will say you need a coach to come. Alabama didn't know what it had when they first signed him. Now,
exactly.
You envisioned this thing is going to turn out the way it did. You didn't. Mm-hmm. It didn't turn out to, as far as kids playing in that style of offense, it resonates with everybody. That's what I meant. So is it, when it is, you can say coaching, and then it is, can you get these guys? But Nate Oates has a system that's fun to play in, and every top kid, whether they go there or they're not, they're going to be interested in playing in that style. So that's what you talk about. A guy that lost every assistant. He lost every assistant last year. Got a head coaching job. He's having to. Who has a faster pipeline to getting a job right now than Nate Oates does? Everybody wants to emulate what they're doing, and that's what we're talking about program. Indiana historically has been a program where you would leave a job, like Alabama, and take that job if it was offered. And I don't know if that's the case anymore. And and that's what I meant when I said about Indiana, where you've lost some of your lust, because we're talking about money and everything else. No one has more money right now than the SEC coaches, and that money spilled over into basketball. And these coaches have flipped these programs, and they're great coaches anyway. But there's not a better program right now for the kids is resonating with this generation than the Alabama Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, indeed. It is kind of amazing to see what they've generated down there. Well, they were in action today. They won. Another team that's had incredible success near the top of the league, who's undefeated, is Todd Golden, who, still you see him on the sideline. He looks like he's about, 18 years old, but he's a heck of a coach, getting the most out of his team. Well, he does. I mean, he looks like a puppy, but they beat Stetson.
Too soon.
What's that?
Too soon.
I don't know what he said, but 85-45 was the final score as the Gators whip up on Stetson, on the Hatters. The Gators shoot 50% from the field. I don't know what's being laughed about. Somebody explain, please.
Check the news.
Yeah.
What happened?
That's
Yeah,
good.
we're gonna go.
Let's
We're gonna
keep
leave
this
that alone.
roll. We don't need to get into
Yeah.
that. We don't need to
But
get into
no,
that. But not
listen, having seen those
Go
guys,
ahead. Go
I
ahead.
will say this. I will say this. Having seen those guys, that I've said this before. Walter Clayton Jr. should be talked about as an All-American candidate. I think he's been that good. I've said that several times. This team is good, man. And I don't know if there's another team in the country that has 3,000-point scorers as their three-guard rotation. They got a hell of a starting lineup, but their depth, guard play, big guys. They coming at you in waves. All their bigs are the same. They're 6'8" to 7 feet, athletic, physical. They all do similar things, but they all bring something a little bit different in how they complement each other, man. They're going to be physical. They're physical as hell. If they can get Elijah Martin consistently going and get Will Richards shooting the ball better at a consistent level, man, I don't think there's a team that Florida can beat. We don't know. No one solved that riddle yet, in their style of play yet. They're undefeated, and they're going to have something to say about the SEC.
I think role definition is something that they have down. Like everybody kind of knows who they're supposed to be. You talked about their bigs. Like they're not trying to go out and score, 25 a game. Like they know it's all about those three guards, letting them rock. And if they miss it, we're going to go chase it down and go get it. And when I watch them, like there's a team that knows exactly who they are and how they want to play. And I will push back. There are probably a few teams with three guards with 1,000 points because there's guys that have played like 10 years of college basketball, right? this year.
But 3,000 point scores, though.
There's three dudes. Yeah. There's three dudes that have probably gotten it done within the normal eligibility time. But the three guys that can go get you 20 every night, like that's hard to deal with because on the times when Walter is cold, which isn't very often, I'm right there with you. He's been just because I don't think maybe enough people have tuned into Florida this year, like don't realize how good he is and how quickly he can fill it up. But that's what I really like about this Florida team is just the fact that they know who they are, who they want shooting the ball, and when they miss it, they can really go get it.
Absolutely. And they've been on fire the entire year. When you look at yesterday, we saw Memphis and Ole Miss go at it. It was a game I was really looking forward to. Two teams that are, not separated by a lot of miles. Certainly Memphis, we all talk about Penny, but Ole Miss, I remember preseason I think it was Doster. Is Doster the one that was just absolutely in love with Ole Miss and who they were?
I think it's T.O. I think it was T.O.
Might have been. Yeah, might have been. Well,
T.O.
I got to remind, or at least I got to text T.O. and say, my God, I mean, that was an ass whipping and then some. And Memphis answered the whole soft thing, 87-70. Little of a humbling for Chris Beard and company. What did you take away from that game last night? Next up for them, they got a little time to recalibrate, is Georgia after the new year. But Randolph, your thoughts on what Ole Miss looked like, just kind of getting walloped yesterday on the road against Memphis?
We don't know how good Ole Miss is, right? I mean, they haven't played the strongest non-conference schedule, so we're about to find out how good they are. I mean, and I expect them to respond from that ass whooping, but just in general, they're talented. We see the talent, and I think that's why T.O. was so big on those guys, and I don't know if I'm as bullish on them as T.O. was or is, but there's some talent there. But we just don't know. There hasn't been enough volume of watching them play against quality opponents, and the ones that they've played against like that, they hadn't fared well. So we're gonna find out whether they're going to be a team that should be ranked or where they slide down to the bottom of the league. There's no way. Like I don't even know who is at the bottom of the SEC. Like searching to say, oh, you got to worry about. Like what is the worst? Like, what is that? I asked somebody that the other day, and everybody's kind of like, I don't know. We sit here right now, and the league as loaded as that is, and none of us can sit here and be like, oh yeah, you know what? Like that's the worst team by far. I don't know, and we're gonna find out a lot about Ole Miss really quick.
CJ, your thoughts on the Rebels and how they're positioned going into the meat of league play?
I think there two concerns for them is one, their inside play. I don't think they've gotten enough consistency out of their bigs. Malik Dia is a guy that I think that they had expectations to come in and kind of maybe be that go too big or just consistent inside player for them. He only plays 15 minutes yesterday for foul trouble. And then defensively, Chris Beard brought in his old running mate Mark Adams from former Texas Tech coach to run his defense again, and his defenses have always been awesome when Mark is running them, and that's something that I think has maybe been disappointing with this group is they haven't guarded like Chris Beard's teams typically guard. So they've had an pretty solid non-conference, but like Randolph said, like they haven't really played many people. Good win against BYU earlier in the year. Pushed, ran with Purdue, close game there, but the schedule hasn't been great. It's kind of like when Chris was at Texas Tech early on, like he would schedule really, really, lower level teams and try to build the confidence up. So we'll see what they have once we're going to, like Randall said, they're every game in the SEC is going to be a quality game. The teams down there at the bottom are like South Carolina, LSU, and those are teams that have a couple decent wins already. So there are no bad teams in the SEC. There might be some slightly above average teams, but I don't think there's any like just turds in that league.
And it works out that way. I don't blame them for scheduling in that way. It's not a knock on them. Like you get to play in the SEC this year. So you're going to get all the quad wins you want, opportunities you need. So, they're 11-2. Like, no need to overreact. But we're going to find out how good they are. Like, are they – and that's all I'm saying. Like, are they 18th team in the country good? Are they top 20 good? Or, are they just going to be a team? We know they're going to win some games. They're going to lose some, like, just a middle of the pack kind of, But at the 18th, because we're talking about it, it's as crazy as it sounds. At the 18th ranked team, if the season ends today, they'd still finish what, like seventh in the SEC. Like, what would they finish right now? As crazy as that is, I mean, that's how ridiculous the league is.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're a top 7 team in the league because the top 7 is just insane.
That's what I'm saying. That's my point.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying. I'm not knocking them. This is what it is.
And there's probably 14 teams you could argue will be in that top 7. So it's pretty crazy the depth.
And a lot of good resume opportunities, like you say, a lot of quad 1 wins, and really not going to have many in way of bad losses. So there's going to be a lot of teams in the NCAA tournament when it's all said and done. Let's take a break. Let's get into some non-conference report cards as it's almost New Year's, almost 2025. We will do that next to end our Sunday on the Field of 68 after dark.
The college basketball season is in full swing. You need to make sure that you have access to the best betting tool on the market, the Rhythm app. Spelled RITHMM, is a data-backed app that uses AI and analytics to identify inefficiencies in betting lines and the player prop market that will allow you, the user, to profit. You can create customized, analytics-driven betting models tailored to your personal preferences as a bettor. Users have access to up to the second against the spread data. And if you're like me and you understand pictures better than numbers on a screen, Rhythm's internal trend analysis provides you with the kind of graphs that will allow you to evaluate past results and project future performance in a visual way. Every Division I college basketball team is included in the Rhythm's metrics. Free subscribers to the Field of 68 Daily will get 25% off for a Rhythm subscription. Use the QR code on the screen to sign up or download at the link in the description.
All right, back here, Field of 68 after dark. It is Sunday night. Chris Childress with Randolph Childress and CJ Moore. Guys, let's wrap it up this evening by giving some report cards, some non-conference report cards. It's almost 2025, almost time for the meat and potatoes of conference play. A couple teams have played a game or two in the league already, but let's assess where we're at with some teams and how we feel about how they are positioned getting into league play, and Kentucky being one of them. I want to start with they beat Duke out of the gates 3 games in. We all kind of fawned and salivated at Mark Pope. They did have that loss to Clemson. They got beat against Ohio State most recently. Their stock dropping. They got hammered by Ohio State, quite frankly. When you look at them, they got the win over Gonzaga. There's some quality. There's some head scratching. Randolph, Childress. Give me a grade on Kentucky. Mark Pope, year one in the non-con.
Listen, I think it's gone as well as it could go. I mean, you got wins against Duke, Gonzaga. I mean, this is a two-loss team. The Ohio State loss is concerning only because I thought Ohio State physically beat them up, and that's not something I would expect with an older team with this level of experience with this group. So, Kentucky has their flaws. We talked about that, maybe not having a guy, but this is a talented team that's going to shoot the crap out of it. They can defend a little better. Williams has to do. I think he has to be a game changer, or can be a game changer on the defensive end of the floor. If he can keep him out of foul trouble, I think he elevates them. But I'm not worried about Kentucky. I give him an A.
CJ, give me a grade for Kentucky non-con.
I'll go A-, just getting blitzed like they did against Ohio State. But I think the expectations coming in, they've surpassed them. I mean, I think preseason, this was like a borderline top 25 team is what most people considered, maybe top 25, barely in, if so. And they've clearly established that they're one of those teams. The win against Gonzaga, I thought was really, really impressive because I think Lamont Butler is their most important player, and they did that without him. So I think Mark Pope has gotten these, completely new roster, and we talked about kind of role definition with Florida earlier. This is another team that I think guys understand for the most part what they're supposed to do and have really bought in really quickly to how Mark wants to play, and getting a team to be able to win a game like the Duke game early on, win that Gonzaga game, 2 preseason top 10 teams, and get them to kind of come together so quickly. I think they deserve, an A- grade, just because I don't think expectations were what we usually have for a Kentucky team.
I would have gone solid A had it not been for the Ohio State game, but beating Duke and Gonzaga certainly spoke volumes about the veteran core of this team early in the year. So A's across the board for them. Let's go to the Kansas Jayhawks next. When you look at this team, the way that they are positioned, their league certainly has changed around them. Their expectation this year has not. They're 9-2 on the season. They lost 2 in a row not long ago to Creighton, and then lost the rivalry to Missouri. They've responded by beating up on an Ivy League team and NC State. When you look at their overall resume, it does include a win over Duke, also a win over North Carolina. They did well against the traditional Tobacco Road powers from the ACC. Kansas, CJ Moore, a grade for the non-con for the Jayhawks is what?
I'll go B-. I think that they have really shown up in the marquee. You mentioned it, and throw Michigan State in the Champions Classic in there, North Carolina, Duke. Beating Duke on a neutral is going to really, really look good at the end, because I think Duke is terrific and one of the best, probably 2 or 3 teams in college basketball. So that one, really, really impressive. I think they've shown that they can play with anybody. There are still some concerns offensively. They don't get to the free throw line. The way Creighton and Missouri played them with cheating off guys like DeJuan Harris. There's still some games where it can kind of look like last season, and the fact that really Missouri, that first half against Creighton too, pretty bad halves against those 2 teams, and to lose those 2 games, they were road games, but really those 2 opponents controlled the game. Those are games you usually want to see a Kansas, preseason number 1, be able to stay in. And, they did have the crazy comeback against Missouri, but still ultimately lost, by 9 points. So I think the Jayhawks are in a decent spot, but I'll give them a B- for how they've played so far.
Randolph, how about your grade?
I give them a B. I think the only thing I worry about with Kansas, as I always do, is worried about will their jump shots and will their offense travel, and ball screen defense. Will they make enough shots? But right now, they've played a pretty good non-conference schedule. Like I said, those wins will age well. We'll see what Kansas does in the conference play. They're going to get everybody's best shot. I'll give them a B.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. B's across the board. A little up and down, but solid overall. How about North Carolina? They are sitting here at 8-5. They've lost to a lot of good teams. Kansas, we just mentioned, being one of them. They lost to an Auburn team that's top 5. Alabama, that's top 10. Got beat by Michigan State. Lost to a Florida team that we've bragged on for what they've done on the court. So not anything bad in terms of losses. They do have a good win against UCLA. Overall, Randolph, give me a grade for the Tar Heels.
I'm not as hard on them as everyone else because I've always say you can't punish teams for scheduling. I mean, it's probably the 5th hardest schedule in the country. So did they win any of those games? No, but I'm not going to penalize them totally. So I'm more at a C+ with them because it's Carolina. Maybe a B-, because I do think you can't punish someone who went out and played the best teams in the country. So I'd grade Carolina on the curve. Are they flawed? Yes. Have they shown an incredible ability to fall behind by double figures and show they can come back and beat anybody? They can, but they're also showing leaks in the armor that probably can lose some games in conference that they shouldn't lose. So I'm at it right around a C+, B- with them right now.
CJ?
Yeah, I'm probably in a similar spot. I'll say C. I think that where they messed up, if you want to give them a bad grade, it'd be in the off season and maybe not addressing the front court more so. And Armando Bacot was obviously really, really important for them, and they weren't able to replace him with anything close to what he was. And I think you if you look back, you probably wish that they'd done something in the portal as far as addressing the inside, the big problem, and that would be a C- probably for their offseason just because of that. But this is a team that I think, like Randolph said, like you can't penalize them too much for playing really, really high level teams. And for the most part, they were in most of those games. Auburn's the one that kind of got away, and like we said, like Auburn, I can get away from you. So wins over Dayton, wins over UCLA. Those are two solid wins. So we could say in here a month or so, Carolina could be ranked again, and could be a team trending upwards. So getting that UCLA win was really, really big. Had to be big for their confidence going into the conference play.
Yeah, I think it definitely boosted their grade. Let's talk Memphis and Penny Hardaway right now. Their non-conference grade kind of up and down. I mean, lost to Auburn. Okay, we get it. Beat UConn. Great win out of conference. Arkansas State, little head scratching. Just beat Ole Miss soundly last night. Responded to the soft. Little up, little down, little Jekyll, little Hyde. But CJ, grade Memphis in the non-conference.
I'll say B+. When you look at the quality of wins, about as good as anybody and close to as good as anybody in college basketball. Win against Mizzou, road games against UNLV, Clemson, Virginia, beating Ole Miss, beating UConn, Michigan State. San Francisco's a decent win. Like that might not be a name, but that's going to age pretty well. So the loss to Arkansas State, and I think as much as Mississippi State controlled that game, I'll give them a B+. But the fact they've gone out and scheduled like they've scheduled, you could almost, I don't think it's crazy to say an A just because they scheduled the way they scheduled and they've shown up. So I'll go B+ just because that Arkansas State one is one that stings a little bit for Tigers fans, I'm sure. But this is a team that I'm still like not sure if I want to fully believe in a little bit. They're like kind of all over the place when you watch them, but got to give them credit for winning games against quality opponents.
For me, it's an A, and their Arkansas State lost away from me giving them 100. Like that's how strong of an A I'd give them. Again, hardest schedule in the country. I think they're right there among the top 3 or 4 teams, the hardest non-conference schedule so far, which was needed from a national perspective once they get in the conference play. We know that, but they've taken care of business on the non-conference schedule. Great interview the other night with him on Field of 68. If you hadn't seen it, go check it out. He was up and honest about his team. More importantly, he was really honest about himself. I think that bodes well for the stability you see in Memphis, and to see Penny speaking the way he is now, man. I think this team gets it done, and we'll be talking about them in March. So they're definitely an A for me.
All right, let's finish up with the Drake Bulldogs. Top team in the Valley right now, undefeated, beat Belmont today inside of league play to improve to 2-0 in the league. They're 12-0 overall. They have non-con wins over K-State. Vanderbilt, they beat Miami out of the league. So some quality wins against power programs. I know you're passionate about it, CJ. You watched them closely today. Tell me about Drake.
I think it's one of the best stories in college basketball. You've got Ben McCollum, who I've a long time told people, I live in Kansas City, Maryville, where he coached Northwest Missouri State's about an hour away from me, and have gotten a chance to watch his team over the years, have profiled him. There's so many coaches across college basketball that respect him and told you before he even got a D1 job that, like, he's one of the best out there. And we're seeing that. Here's a guy who came from Division II, brought 4 of his Division II players with him. They all start. They almost play. They play all the minutes. He goes about 6-7 deep. Bennett Sturt's his star player, never comes off the floor. And they have 3 wins over high majors, a win over FAU, which is pretty good. I give him an A+. I think Ben's done a tremendous job with this group. He only has a couple shooters, but he finds a way to win every single game. They get better as the game goes on. Belmont's a team that's pretty good. Has some quality, has a couple of quality wins, has played some good teams close. Just came off a close loss to UC Irvine, who's really, really good this year. And Drake just controlled that game from basically about 5 minutes in onward, and really good, solid win for Missouri Valley win today. And I think Ben's getting the most out of his group he possibly can, and they really, really guard. They never make mistakes. They know who they are. He runs awesome stuff offensively. They're very patient. So I think he's done a tremendous job, and that group that he's brought with him has done an awesome job, and A+ for me.
I mean, how do you argue with perfection? I mean, what are you going to, they went and won the Charleston Classic. They beat Miami when we thought Miami was going to be good, and winning the Charleston Classic, even though now they're not, but still that at Kansas State win, FAU win, Vandy win. These are all big time wins, man, and nothing but respect for what they've done so far. They'll lose some of the conference play. Missouri Valley will get tough for them. They'll lose a few games. I think Bradley's really good as well. Great start to the year, man. What else can you say about those guys?
Incredible start. Like you said, Randolph, can't argue with perfection. Time for our toast of the evening to wrap it up on a Sunday on the Field of 68 after dark. I will start with, and it's a fitting for a toast, with a nice frothy Porter Moser. Gonna say Oklahoma, not a great win today. I mean, they did what they had to do. They beat Prairie View 89-67, but set up a really intriguing game against Alabama. That game's coming up on January 4th. Oklahoma comes in undefeated. I think we're all kind of intrigued to see what they are. But give Porter credit. They win today. They stay undefeated. And, shout out and toast to Oklahoma. Who's next, boys? Go ahead, Randolph.
I'm going to go with Alabama. It's funny you say that. I was thinking the same thing. And just scheduled a hell of a schedule this year. Played everybody. I even thought their low major games were challenging. Playing McNeese State, other programs I thought was really good for those guys. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I think they'll win the game at home and hand Oklahoma their first loss. But it won't change anything, I think, from Oklahoma.
Take us home, CJ.
I'm going to go Michigan. And we talk about the Big Ten wide open.
Ooh,
I think one team to
it.
watch is the Wolverines. They've lost their 3 games by a combined, let me do the math here, 5 points. They could very easily be undefeated. Hit 19 threes today and put up 112 against Western Kentucky. I think that Michigan's a team that we could see here in a couple months winning the Big Ten. I'm not sure they will, but don't count out Michigan when you discuss the Big Ten. I really like that group. They turn it over a little much, But that front court's, I think,
Wow.
about as good as any front court in the country.
Wow. You jumping out
Drinking
there.
that
Wow.
dusty,
I like
drinking
it.
that Dusty May
I like
Kool-Aid.
it. I like it.
Hail to the
like-
victors, indeed. We're done for the evening. Go ahead. One more thought. Go ahead.
Nah,
CJ.
Danny Wolf, man. Danny Wolf. Watch Danny Wolf. That dude can ball. He's fun.
He is absolutely fantastic. We're done. Beautiful Sunday evening. Thanks for watching, everybody.